It's my privilege to introduce my good friend, Bo Sandoval.
Appreciate it. Wow. I guess after hearing all of that, the first thing you have to know is that I'm really not that special. In fact, you can fact check this, but I was not the first 5'8", 190-pound Mexican to play in the NFL. John Welborn can probably confirm that. So let's get into this. So Bert called and asked, and for the last 10, 15 years, I've given presentations all over the world on periodization, a lot of things to do with combat sports, into the most specific of granular things around training. So to come up and give a little bit of a career talk is really weird for me. It's a little different than to give a career talk where you're talking about yourself. That's a little challenging too. So bear with me as I kind of move through this. I had a conversation with Bert when he called me to ask about speaking this year. And he's like, man, you've been at some cool places. You've done some cool things. We just want to hear about how you got there. How'd you get there? How'd you position yourself to do that? And so as I kind of sat on that, you got to turn that into a presentation, right? You got to turn it into some topics to where people can digest it and use it, hopefully, as part of their skill set. The one thing I can say is I've been intentional. I got taught that early, to be intentional. There was nothing by chance. I wasn't just kind of throwing a cast net out there and selecting whatever internship would take me, kind of a thing. I've always had that mentality that I was going to use the industry to serve me as I figured out how to serve it. And I think that Welborn hit on a few key points when he talked about authenticity. Our career has a maturation rate. Now, everyone's rate is different, but from start to finish, you're going to accumulate so much experiential knowledge, whether it's technical, it's managerial, it's soft skills, whatever. All that stuff is going to accumulate over time. So your ability to pivot or your ability to target is literally going to happen minute by minute if you're paying attention. So intentionality to me is probably the biggest overarching thing when it comes to trying to figure out what you want to do, what's your end game, and what do you want to get to, what's the ultimate career path look like for you. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of mine, hopefully take a couple tidbits away. We'll get into a background, we'll talk, that's kind of the origin of the topic, is just how do you get to those places? How do you do those things? We'll talk about my family. I come from an athletics family. We were around it early and always around it. I played a lot of sports, and then I'm going to talk some about my coaching tree. The thing I love about my coaching tree, most of you guys have probably never heard of them. Most of my biggust influences, you've probably never heard of them. But when we speak on their brilliance and some of their accolades, you'll recognize those. And I got to give a lot of tribute because they've really paved a path for me to have opportunities. And then we'll get on the path. What's the path look like? So you got to say thanks to, this guy he's become like a brother. And, people are like, oh, well, of course you're going to be friends with him. You bought a few $1 million of his equipment, of course, right? It is definitely not that. Time spent, there's just people that you resonate and you connect with. And it's almost a point where, I can talk to him about anything. He can talk to me about anything. I can interrupt him whenever I need. He can interrupt me when he needs. He mentioned the word lean in, and I find I don't really lean in that much, but I do lean on. And that's a dude that I can just lean on whenever I need to. So thank you for having me, Bert, and the Soren family, man. This thing is amazing. 17 years of doing this. I've been at maybe 6 or 7 of them. They keep getting better every year. I learn something every year. Meet new friends, new industry leaders every year. So it's really special to just be a part of this whole thing. So competitive family. This little guy, does this work? Ricky, you lied. The pointer doesn't work. There it is. All right. That guy right there. That's my dad at 17 years old. Melvin, Texas. That high school doesn't exist anymore because the town was so small they ended up just scattering the people out to other towns around. He played track. He ran track and field. He was a Golden Glove state boxer. Played 7-on-7 football. They didn't have enough kids. They didn't play 11v11. Neither did the towns around them. So they all played 7v7. From early on, whether I liked sports or not, you kind of made it apparent you're going to try stuff. You're going to get out and you're going to try stuff. I had nowhere to run because the young lady standing in the next picture was my mother. She played competitive soccer in the Mexican leagues up till about 36 years old. And so we were at the soccer field. I remember being as a kid, we'd be there all day long. And being a white lady playing in a Mexican league in East Texas and South Texas, like different level of savagery. One, they don't speak your language. Two, it is definitely full contact soccer. And they didn't really have tech. I don't know if you see that bandage on her leg. I don't know what bones she's trying to hold together in that picture, but that's just how they did it. They were rough and tough, and we were always around that. A lot of you know my wife, best athlete in my family, and probably will be for generations, but she was a 3-time world team member as a weightlifter. She competed at 3 Olympic trials, winning the Olympic trials in 2012, won best lifter. At 58 kilos, she snatched 91 kilos and clean and jerked 114. My kids don't know it. I got 2 boys. They don't know it yet. They're going to rub their mother wrong one day, and they're going to get an idea of how strong she is. But they kind of test a little bit. They want to wrestle, and they kind of like tug, and I'm like, don't do that, because the second she puts her hand on them, they get an idea. When I was coming up, I tried everything. I wasn't really gifted with height. I wasn't really gifted with girth or anything else. Don't make a joke out of that later. But I did track and field. I did almost every event. We were a small high school, and so anything the coach was like, somebody want to try this? I was like, I'll try it. So I threw the disc, I threw the jab, I ran the hurdles, I ran the 1,000 meters, which was brutal. I played football, I was a linebacker. I played baseball, hated baseball. My head baseball coach was our defensive coordinator, who was one of my closest people when I was in high school. I just looked up to this guy so much. He's like, I need you to run bases on the baseball team. He's like, you got some wheels. We got some guys with big sticks, but they can't run. I was like, Coach, I hate baseball. Well, I'd already been kicked out of 3 team meetings in football because I'd always have tobacco in my mouth, and we had a team rule, you can't chew tobacco. Well, I grew up, all my uncles and my dad, like, we just always had a bag of Red Man in our pocket. So he goes, I tell you what, if you just come run bases, I'll let you chew as much tobacco as you want in the dugout. So that's how I got into baseball. And then later on, I got out of baseball. I didn't really do that. I did a couple years in high school. But one thing that I fell in love with in high school was, while I wasn't all that gifted, I noticed guys that were. I played alongside guys that went to play on, I grew up in Baton Rouge. They went on to play at LSU, some other SEC schools. Some of them play at small schools. But as I'm watching them, there were some that went because they just had it. They were born with it. It was ingrained in them. They didn't have to work that hard. I watched others do the same thing that went through a process. And I got introduced to the training process. I got introduced to preparation. We used to study the old Boyd Epley films. They got sent to my high school coach. We were following Husker Power all through the summertime. And not that I was really digesting what was going on with all that stuff. I just fell in love with, like, wait, so if you don't have that, you can follow a process and you can accumulate some of that, and then you can go and be something. And that's kind of when I first started to get an itch. Now, I didn't know I wanted to be a strength coach. I didn't even know that was a thing yet. But I knew that I wanted to do something with instruction. I wanted to do something with development. And so growing up, and pretty much now, I find stuff to compete in all the time. I've already learned that most of the time I'm not going to be the top 1%er. But I do know there's a process to prepare where I can go in and compete. I can make it more difficult for other people to win, because I am a dog when it comes to competing. When it comes to just finding ways to win, to scrape a few more points, those are the things it's savage. It's part of our DNA, but it can be very strategic. And if anyone that's ever been around me, I've kind of fallen in love with the idea that someone with less tools and less resources can be strategic and overcome someone that has more tools, more resources, if they're equipped with a bad plan. So coming through, I've done precision marksmanship, lots of jiu-jitsu. I don't know if you guys noticed by the pictures, but the one up top in the middle, I was 21 years old, in grad school. I'm a blue belt. The one on the right, is IBJJF Worlds in 2019. I'm a blue belt. So there was a hiatus there. When I started bouncing around coaching, that was probably about, 8, 9 years where I didn't get to train jiu-jitsu. Living in Ann Arbor, we didn't have a lot of options for good academies there. When I moved to Vegas, we were in the hotbed. You take your pick. There was a different world champion coaching on every corner. So was able to fall into a good gym there. I did eventually get a purple belt, but there was a lot of talk yesterday about this idea of a white belt, be a white belt. One of the best instructors I ever had under Charles Cobrania was the idea of a white belt mentality. You got to have a white belt mentality all the time. It doesn't, even when you become an expert, you still have a white belt mentality. You hear quotes about black belts in jiu-jitsu. Black belts aren't the ones that are the most talented or strangle the most people. They're the ones that just don't stop going. So I might be 80 when I get my black belt, but I'll keep going. And the idea is just always have a white belt mentality, so you're learning. We're gonna get into a lifelong learning process. For me, the question that got sparked by Bert was, you've been to some places, how'd you get there, what did you do? So the places, I went to school at Southern Mississippi, undergrad and graduate school, not a renowned exercise physiology school, not a renowned sports management, but a pretty good school. Why did you go there? Well, it was about an hour and a half from the hunting camp that I grew up around, so I'm like, hey, it's a quick transition in between classes, I can buzz over, go spend a weekend in the woods, come back. It made sense, right? How I got there is an interesting one. So I actually started at Northwestern State, Louisiana, and didn't know what strength and conditioning was. Had an in-state scholarship for academics. I go up there, I noticed the bars are open on the weekend, like all night long, but I don't have any money, so I can't really go do that. Well, how do I make money? So I applied for an on-campus job. They stuck me out the softball and baseball fields cutting grass. So I did that, made my weekend money. I went early, I went in the summertime. Well, about 3 weeks into it, the softball coach approached me and she says, hey, I need an equipment manager. I'm like, what's that? She's like, you're gonna do some laundry, you're gonna chalk some fields, take care of things around, just keep us tidy. No problem, I'll do it. What do you pay me? She's like, well, I can give you a stipend. I don't remember what it was. Sure thing, no problem. We get about a month into that, the team gets there and I start noticing they're going down to the weight room a couple times a week. And I say, Coach, do you care if I go and just watch what they're doing? She said, no, tag along, go right ahead. At the time, there was a gentleman named Thad Livingston who was running the strength and conditioning program at Northwestern State. Super friendly guy. He's like, don't touch anything. Don't say anything to anyone. Stand over there. You can watch as much as you want. I'm like, thanks, I appreciate it. So watch the team train, watch the football team train, track and field team train, notice some subtle differences and things. I said, do you mind if I do this a little bit every day, just as my schedule? He's like, yeah, no problem. And I was helping him clean up, helping him do things around, helping him set things up. So he let me keep doing it. Well, halfway through that fall, the head coach calls me and says, hey, you're from Baton Rouge, right? Yes, ma'am. Well, I just got the head coaching job at Southern Miss. You're going to be a little bit closer to home. If you come down there, I can get you the same deal you have right now. I get you a scholarship for being an equipment manager. We can pay you hourly, and then you do the deal, go to school, get your degree. Sounds good. One stipulation. I need you to introduce me to the head strength coach the day we step foot on campus. So already I had like this intentional plan. I found this thing that I liked. Wasn't sure how to do it or how I was going to get into it. But the first thing I thought was, man, if I get an opportunity, I got to figure out how to get to a place where I can start being trained on this. I can start getting instruction on how to do this. So that's what she did. And when we got there, I sat down and had a meeting with the strength staff, basically weaseled my way into doing a volunteer internship. That was my sophomore year in college. I did that for 3 years for no pay, and I was an equipment manager. I've had a conversation with somebody about odd jobs when they were in college. So I was an equipment manager. I usually did laundry till about, 1:30, 2 in the morning, something like that. And then I drove a bread truck. Well, bread trucks leave at like 4 a.m. So I might sleep an hour and a half, get up, go pick up the bread truck, go make my deliveries, come back. First session in the weight room, 6:30. So I'm there observing, helping. You just found a way to make it work, because for me, the ultimate thing was I need to be in that weight room. I need to understand what those gentlemen are doing in there and start to figure it out. And so that's what I did. So Southern Miss was, I didn't work or get paid there. They eventually paid for my grad school. That was a blessing. I did 2 years of graduate school there. But then these others were just stops that have kind of culminated to let me do the things that I want to do. Belhaven College is a small Presbyterian school in Jackson, Mississippi. I was a head strength coach. I was 24 years old. That's weird, right? That's who would give that much responsibility to a 24-year-old? Well, for $26,000 a year, we'll give it to just about whoever will take it, and I was that guy. So through those stops, through those things, man, I can't like sit here and put 700 people that have influenced me as I've come through things, but I put some critical ones up. So Charlie Dudley was the head strength coach at Southern Miss. I walk into his office. He's a pretty intimidating man, much bigger in stature than I am. But sits down and goes, what are you trying to accomplish? I said, I want to learn how to be a strength coach. And he goes, we can help you with that. What else are you trying to do? I want to get a degree. We can help you with that. What else do you want to do? I want to learn something about leadership. We can help you with that. Okay, cool. Then he says, what can you do for us? Hold that thought. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. What do you do as a beginner? What can you offer as a beginner when you have no real competency to offer? We'll talk about, what's that? You got it. That's a big one. But under Charlie, the things that I did pick up as a novice, organizational principles. He's the most organized dude I've ever been around. Very type A, very obsessive compulsive. Way more than I don't want to be like that. That's not my personality. But I definitely picked up some tricks, because what that teaches you is when you're drowning in athletes, which I don't know which one of you work in a one-to-one scenario, but most of us are outnumbered. It teaches you how to be organized, working with large numbers, but still be calculated, still be able to track training loads, still be able to monitor and understand who's at what stage in their developmental path. So his organizational principles really taught me that. Structure, reliability qualities. I've never been late. I'll never be late. My kids, even right now, they stress out about not being late, because I think that is like the most important message that you could send is, I'm serious. I will be here. You can rely on me. Got that hammered in early there. And then he said this quote to me, and I still say it today. In fact, I hadn't seen Charlie in about 10 years, and at the CSCCA a couple weeks ago, I'm with some of my colleagues. We're in a restaurant, we're eating dinner, and I look over and I see this gleaming bald head. And once you've seen a bald head, one in particular, for a while, you can recognize it from a mile away. He's facing away from me at the bar, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, man, I think that's Charlie. I think that's him. And I waited. I didn't want to go up, and be wrong. And so he turned his head a little bit, and then I went right up to him like, hey, pay your tab, come over here, you're gonna eat dinner. He's like, holy shit, but hadn't seen him in years. Comes and sits down. It was only about 2 sentences in, it was almost like jinx, say this at the same time. If you meet someone that knows it all, turn and run the other way. He used to tell me that all the time. Son, if you meet someone that they know it all, turn and go the other direction. And not that I ran into that a ton in my career, but it definitely told me I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that where I don't have that white belt mentality anymore, where I can't learn something from someone younger. I can't learn something from someone less experienced. I can't learn something from someone that's more experienced. I can't tell you how many horror stories now of guys that have been in the industry for 40 years, and they're like, these cats don't even listen to me anymore. They think I'm too outdated. I'm old school. That's just the wrong audience. They've lost their white belt mentality. Hill Denson is a Hall of Fame baseball coach, and I told you guys probably wouldn't know some of these folks that are up here. He gets credit for making baseball popular in the state of Mississippi between the 70s and 80s. He's in the American Baseball Hall of Fame. The baseball park at Southern Miss is named after him. I was super lucky. He came out of retirement to coach the baseball team at Belhaven while I was there. So 24-year-old kid that don't know his elbow from his asshole. And this guy with all the experience and the way he coached baseball internationally, been overseas, coached all over the place. Knew the game of baseball, but he knew coaching. He knew language. He knew connection. He knew eye contact. He was a master at those things. Well, when I first sat down to meet with him, we're trying to devise what are our priorities going to look like for the baseball team with where they're at. I started going, well, let's talk about arm care, and let's talk about conditioning for pitchers, and how many 9-inning guys do you have? And he's like, son, slow down. I don't care how. All I care is that you're going to be responsible for the results or the lack of. That's it. You got it, no problem. He was a results-oriented guy. He wasn't overly invested in the process, and that was the first time I was ever given extreme autonomy to say, that's yours, you own it, and you need to own up to it when it works or when it doesn't work. And I took that very seriously, not only as I wanted to grow and earn autonomy in all the different roles that I had, but I wanted to gift it to those that were coming up. There's nothing worse than having an overbearing, over-controlling boss that tells you how to do every single thing. Because what that means is your boss is scared of failing. They're scared of failing so much that they're not going to let you fail. And I just never wanted to be like that. And so him giving me that, I definitely took my lumps. I definitely made mistakes. We talked about it. I got coached out of it. And at that moment, I'm like, I want to lead that way. When I get someone under my wing, I want them to know, I expect you to make mistakes. I just don't expect you to make the same mistakes over and over again. So his leadership to me during that time frame was invaluable. Shift gears, the Colorado Springs Olympic Training Center. How do you get to that place? Well, you get really lucky. When I applied, now I'm 26, almost 27 years old. There was a couple hundred other resumes in the stack that had way more experience, way more diversity in experience than what I had. And when I left Southern Miss, the new grads assistant that was coming in needed some help moving into his apartment. Some of you guys might know him. He coached at Virginia Tech for a number of years. His name's Brian Neal. And I helped Brian move into his apartment. We bonded, we connected, we stayed in contact over the years. Well, Brian was wrapping up an internship at the OTC in California. And he's sitting in his boss's office at the time, and he notices a stack of resumes sitting in the trash can. And right on top of the stack is a resume that says, Bo Sandoval. And he looks at it and he goes, hey, Kim, have you seen this resume? And she's like, oh, yeah, he doesn't have enough experience. He's not qualified. And he's like, you need to talk to that guy. Like, you're over, putting too much stock into what's on that piece of paper. You need to talk to him. He's like, promise me you'll talk to him. And he had good rapport with her at the time. She's like, okay, yeah, no problem. So she passes it along to this gentleman, Patrick Borkowski, who's at the top of that list under the USOC. And because of that, that transpired into a very long and strenuous interviewing process. It lasted like 4 months, but that took me away from Belhaven College and dumped me into a world of higher learning that, one, I wasn't ready for, but was just blessed by. There were gentlemen whose offices were down the hallway that were writing the textbooks that I was studying when I was in college. And so to be surrounded with that type of intellect and that type of strategy was extremely powerful at that time frame in my career. The big takeaway from Patrick, when we went through this process, I asked him eventually, I go, dude, why me? Like, you guys had some studs in that pool. And he made a point to say, when you're going through the hiring process, it's the most important thing you can do in a management role, is hire correctly. If you hire badly, it's not easy. It's not always easy to get rid of that problem. And then operationally, it just throws things in disarray. It's like you don't ever want to screw this up. And the detail and the process that they went through in that search, that's how I do it today. In fact, there's one thing I think personally that's deteriorating a little bit of our industry is the over-automation of incestuous hiring, to the point where it's like familiarity is priority number one, and we don't even take a good granular look to say, is that, I know them really well, and I know how capable they are, but are they the right fit for the role that I have devised in front of me? And then even to another step, are we actually designing the roles? Or is it just a plug and play? Oh, that sport needs a coach, give them one. Oh, that sport needs a coach, give them one. So getting into the deeper depths of designing roles so that, one, we can focus on things like retention. I don't know if you guys noticed, but retention in strength and conditioning sucks. We're not great at it. In fact, when you meet those unicorns that have been in a place for 24 years or 30 years, give them a hug, shake their hand, buy them a drink, ask how they did that. But one of the reasons we suck at retention is we don't formulate roles and then go and try to fit skill sets and personalities, competency with those roles. And so this process taught me a lot about that. You can do a deep investigation. Is it more work? Yeah, it's more work. But so is good training. It's just like strength and conditioning. The more work you put in, the more quality work, the more calculated, you're going to get more out of it. I have screwed up hiring processes before, once. I'll never do that again. So that's one that I would say it stuck hard because it slapped me in the face at some point. John Carlock underneath him. This is the first time that I faced real 1v1, I don't give a shit what you think debate, minute by the minute, in the workplace over and over again. But in a way, he wasn't cutting my legs out from under me. He wasn't telling me I was an idiot. But I had to sit there and justify, and he had to justify to me, and we had to argue, and we went back and forth over peer-reviewed materials and strategy and effectiveness on all these things. And that was the first time I ever had to do that with someone. And it was amazing, to the point where I do that with, there's probably a handful of guys in here that have coached with me, worked with me. We do that. We don't do that because I'm trying to ridicule them. We do that because I need to know that they know what they're talking about. Oh yeah, and I'm a fucking white belt. I might learn something from them. And so that guy taught me a ton about, hey, just ask them why. Like, why do you do that? If they don't have a good calculated reason, then pull the Charlie Dudley method. You met someone that knows it all, run the other way. So the art of debate is dying. We see it all over the place. But in strength and conditioning, it's dying because people don't want to hurt people's feelings, or I don't want to step on toes, and it's making us soft. It's given us the inability to be able to have a good quality discussion with a really competitive coach, a Bill Belichick of the world. If you can't do that with your colleagues, you're not going to convince that. You're not going to influence that guy. You're not going to influence a world champion who's got 17 knockouts under their belt, who's lost twice, that, hey, we're going to pivot a little bit because this will optimize what we're doing. You have to learn how to do that. There's an art to the language, and there's an art to the appreciation of the person that you're speaking with. And then John did this other little quote that I still, this day, I'll stamp it on my workout sometime. It's plan the work the plan. Long-term, short-term, doesn't matter, but it's premeditated. We still have way too many practitioners in this field that will drive up in the parking lot, cook something up in their brain, slap it on a board, let's go. That's just like showing up late. How can we be a master of preparation when we haven't taken the time to prepare the plan? Like, real time, digest it, test it, understand its level of effectiveness, its appropriateness, scale it. Can I scale it to the 30 different people sitting in front of me right now? Plan the work the plan. USA weightlifting will always have a place in my heart. There was a ton of tutelage that went on with that. All I wanted to do was learn how to coach weightlifting. And yeah, I'm going to be a dick. It's not Olympic weightlifting. You have to actually qualify for the Olympics. Sorry. So all you guys that are like, I Olympic weightlift. No, you don't. And it's very difficult to qualify for an Olympic Games. You're just weightlifting. But when I noticed I wanted to learn how to weightlift, I've taken this approach with everything in my career. It's like, I want to go after the source. I want to go after the best people that know how to do that. So when I got to the OTC, the training hall is right next door. And so on my lunch break, in between groups, whatever, I was in those coaches' ears. I was watching them with developmental kids at 14 years old, and I was watching them with athletes that were standing on the podium the year before at 28, 30 years old. All developmental levels, trying to understand not just what are the positional X's and O's of executing the lift, but what is the progression of learning it from a motor standpoint. Because what do you hear about that stuff right now, and you could really hear this about anything, is, oh, I don't teach that because it takes too long to teach, or I don't teach that because it's too complicated for my kids to learn. Dude, that's on the practitioner. And I would say that for anything. I struggle with energy systems with these kids, so we just run 110s. It's like, that ain't that kid's fault. You got to spend more time studying the energy systems. You got to understand metabolism. You got to understand mechanics. You have to understand positional accuracy. These people taught me that. There's some big type A minds up there, Bob Morris, John Coffey, rest his soul, Leo Totten, that not only took me in as a student, they trained me. I had to coach, I had to train, which I don't know if you guys have ever gone through rigorous year-round weightlifting regimens, but it's brutal. It's a rough sport. It's a lot like wrestling. Wrestling's unforgiving. That's how weightlifting is. But it's progressive, and it's addictive because the kilos keep going up, and you just keep getting baited in and baited in. The magic behind it, though, that I loved is once literacy is there, your kilos were coming from efficiency. Not always just strength. I watched some just monsters in the squat rack, monsters overhead pressing, and couldn't clean and jerk body weight and a half. Couldn't snatch body weight and a half. That's an efficiency thing. I told you about how I fell in love with strategy. When we can figure out how to strategize a problem and still come up with a solution to win, those are the types of things that fascinate me. So weightlifting was that. It was a biomechanical math problem. And so getting different body types, I fell in love with it. Not to the point where I just wanted to use it in my training. I coached it for about 11 years. I ran a club at the University of Michigan. We sent a ton of kids to junior worlds, world universities. We had a couple that made some senior world teams. Really good time. But I'm also not a weightlifting coach. Back to the intentionality, I wanted that to be a skill set in my repertoire that I could master. As far as that goes, that led down all other rabbit holes. Oh, I need to learn sprinting. Well, I'm going to call Dan Paff, and I'm going to call Lauren Landau, and get around those types of they master that stuff. Go to the source to really understand how to do it. So a lot of these cats taught me that. Mike Favor, longtime mentor, still is to this day. He's a director of strength and conditioning at the University of Michigan. He's a veteran, retired Army, drove a Bradley in Desert Storm. Taught me a ton about stakeholders. In fact, even gave me the opportunity to be a stakeholder. This is when my leadership part starting to get some understanding of managing people, dealing with administrators, dealing with donors, dealing with that kind of stuff. The biggest thing about him, this guy, as hard as he was, patience and the ability to be steadfast no matter what we were dealing with. I, especially early on, was definitely a hothead and ready to just throw down. And his ability to just maintain his composure and his patience as we chew through problems to get back to the thing that's most important, which is training and influencing athletic performance. His ability to do that was just uncanny. Dr. Duncan French was our high performance director at the UFC. Duncan, a lot of people don't know this about Dunk. He's from England, but he played American football. He was a running back in England. And Dunk is brilliant. He's a physiologist. He's a strength coach. Brilliant on all those things. I mean, no question. But the thing that he's really a master at is this idea of a VMOST. Really developing vision, mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics in that sequential order. And that's what we did at the UFC. We devised plans around taking this very, very chaotic sport and prioritizing skills and training around concepts like what's the vision? What's the mission that we need to prioritize at the moment? What are some objectives to say that we've completed that or not? What are some strategies to get to those objectives? And what are some minute-by-minute tactics that make those strategies work? That was our system, and that's how we kind of worked through problem solving with roughly 700 to 730 athletes globally on the UFC roster. And then cross-disciplinary integration. As much as we get stretched into nutrition, recovery, all these areas, and we even pick up some skills that we get pretty good at, having specialists in those areas is like another level resource. When you think like, man, that's great. We got all these other people to help me with these other things. Not that easy. There's integration models you have to instill on how to do that. How does the communication work? How's the overlapping of data? How's the overlapping of instruction? How does that take place? That's got to be orchestrated. This dude was a master at laying those things over to the point where it was fun. In fact, we designed our buildings in a way that integration started with the construction of the building. You want people to be integrated? Put them hip to hip. Put them right on top of each other. Make them share clusters of offices. This idea of siloing out office, now you got to schedule a meeting. Oh, I got to meet with the dietitian. I got to meet. We were right there all the time. Now, if I wanted a private meeting, I'd go use a private consultation room and I'd have a private phone call. But that was the best model of integration because you're up each other's butt all day, every day. When I'm dealing and I'm talking out loud about a strategy around training, my dietitian's right there saying, oh, well, we need to up this and we need to up that so that we can complement that. Or we need to be careful with that because we're in a weight mitigation mode. That dude's 12% over body weight. He's not going to make any money if he doesn't make weight. And so being able to have those sort of pivot points live all the time, that's a real integrated model. Anyway. Getting started, I don't know how I found this picture, but I'm not actually coaching. We're judging a slam dunk contest with our basketball team at Belhaven College. The beginning of your career is like a fresh canvas, painted with passion, dedication, and hard work, because that's all you got. When you're a beginner, you don't know shit. I don't have competencies. I don't have weightlifting. I don't have energy system development. All those things are not mastered yet. I'm accumulating those. But what I do have is passion, dedication, and hard work. Devotion. Because in the beginning with a lot of athletes, that's what they need a cohort. They need companionship in a directed form. And then we can start to chip away at those other things. In fact, I would even say while that was helpful and that was effective, that's a bad model. Like I would not want to start a beginner out like that. Hey, you're fresh out of college, go take this school. They got 16 sports, you're all by yourself. Go. That uniform, I had to raise money to buy those clothes because there was no budget for it. But what it taught me was resourcefulness. While I was there, I didn't have an office. So I built one. I took masonry classes on the weekend. I learned how to lay bricks. I got approval from an AD. I went and bought a pallet of them. I built an office. I worked at a glass shop for part-time when I was in college. Called my old boss, can I get some windows on discount? No problem. Installed windows in my office, and now I could set up a printer and print out some workouts and actually do the things I was supposed to be doing. So while I didn't have the competency on the high level of strength and conditioning, I had hustle. Everyone, that looks different for everybody. Everybody's got a different niche on how they hustle and how they show energy and enthusiasm or whatever. As long as you have it, you can start to earn worth. And then people will invest in you and all those other competencies that you need to be good at this job. But you got to earn your keep. I always had self-talk points. I do this to this day. I forget the author of the book. There's a great book by a psychologist. I think he's from Scotland. It's called Unfuck Yourself. And it's all about positive self-talk. And it's a great book, but there's a lot of tactics and drills in there on how you talk. So I've done this my whole career, so I have these little self-talking points in some of these slides, but my skills are limited at this point. I have to acknowledge that. What do I want to be known for? And then also, don't worry, higher expectations are right around the corner. Because as you advance in this career, the expectations just get higher and higher and higher, which that's the competitive side of us, right? We don't really get to compete for points anymore, but we can compete for expectations and then try to rise to meet those expectations. So in the meantime, my skills are I can be honest, I can be reliable, I can be relentless, I can be influential, and I can be fearless. Fearless from a standpoint of I'll own my mistakes. I'm going to go hard. I'm going to stumble. I'm going to pick myself up, but I'm going to keep moving forward. Those are the things that I can promise at that point, that stage in my career. You're going to see how this shifts because, again, there's a maturation rate to how these things go down, and everyone does it a bit different. I'm not saying this is how to do it. I'm just saying this is a version of what happened to someone. But competency is what you'll accumulate as you're earning your worth with all those passion skills. Your words start to lose value when your actions don't match. How many coaches have fallen victim to this? Competency is something that expires over time. You have to keep up with it. You have to be rigorous in staying up to date with it. Even from things that we take for granted, bench pressing, squatting, like there are generations of technicians coming up that are finding better, more efficient ways on how to institute things like that, how to teach it to where it's more ingrained, it becomes automated faster, to where you don't have to keep re-instructing. They're getting better at it. So it behooves us not to back up and keep upgrading our competencies in all those skills. When I think competency, you got to embrace lifelong learning. Continuous skill building will transform your career. It absolutely will. The best coaches I've met in the world, they're not only extremely accurate in what they know how to teach, but their library is dense. It is thick. It is deep. The toolbox is deep. What that means is they're a real evaluator. I can go and evaluate an athlete, evaluate a problem, evaluate a task at hand, and go, oh, I have a tool for that. It's in this drawer. Pull that out. Versus the coach that has one tool or two tools. Those are going to come up short at some point. We have to be strategists and we have to be agile in how we address certain things. So this lifelong learning quest serves you well in not only the accumulation of skills, but the refinement of skills. And along those lines, things that get forgotten too, language. Language is critical. The more clean, precise, and sharp your language is, the quicker the message gets received, the more accurate the lifting becomes, it's a cycle that way. If you bumble over your words and you got to say 17 things to get one thing out, it's really hard for an athlete who's aspiring to just work hard that day to pick up what you're throwing down. So you have to learn to be concise but effective. Instruction is at the basis of what we do. And there's an art to that. There is an art to instruction because there's a scale to it. And every athlete you have in your weight room or every athlete you influence or every coach you're dealing with, they have a different curve on how they absorb information, which means they have a different curve on how they're going to absorb your effectiveness. And so my ability to be able to deliver, that's important. That's something you have to constantly refine is instruction. How do you instruct? Who am I instructing? And am I addressing them appropriately to be able to be effective? And then relevance. We get lost in this one all the time. We're just on this 8-week program. We're going. It lost relevance 3 weeks ago, but I'm still going. It's week 7, it's week 8. Constantly revisiting, are we relevant? Are we on task? That's where that VMOS concept comes into play because you're constantly studying your vision, your mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics, staying on point to really address the problem that's at hand. Second, you lose relevance, you lose buy-in, you lose connectivity, and you lose effectiveness. Let me back up a tick. I talked about the accumulation of skills. These are my skill sets. These are the things that over the years, I did not dabble in them. I didn't spend a couple weeks. I didn't go to a seminar. I spent an awfully long time on those things. I got critiqued on those things by some of the best in the world on those things. I still do to this day. There are things that I incorporate quite a bit. There's more, there's plenty more. But I say that because it takes, one of those things would be a weekend seminar and then several months to master and then how to coach it. Then you got to test on how you install it and then maybe take it out and reinstall it. It takes a while to be able to put those skills into an operational state. And so this will never end. If I give this presentation in 5 years, the list may double, but I'll still be going back and revisiting plyometrics and sprinting. I'll still be going back and revisiting kettlebell lifting and mace lifting. Networking. What a great venue for that, right? Here. Networking is not just going up and saying, "Hi, sir, good to meet you. I know all about you." Then that's it. Then you walk off, you go get your beer, and I go get my beer. If you want to network, you've got to find a way to make a connection with people. And then you got to figure out a way where you can even position yourself to offer something, because then they will offer you something. That's networking. It's an exchange of information. It's an exchange of appreciation. Over time, your network is going to yield tremendous opportunities for you and what you're able to do. The bridges you build today will be the roads you travel tomorrow. There's another little thing that I carry in my pocket all the time is I'm always going to have this mentality, build more bridges than you burn. And that's a difficult thing to do. How many people, and I think I've heard it probably 700 times since I've been here this weekend, I love being around like-minded people. Man, it's great because everyone here is like-minded. That's fun, but influence unlike-minded people. Get to the point where you can interact and exchange with unlike-minded people. Your weaponry expands quite a bit. They have different perspectives than you do. Is it difficult? Sure, you can't stand the sound of their voice or how they smack their food or whatever else. But I'll never not get something because I hate this excuse. You talk about, well, wait, why'd you do that? Man, I can't work with that guy. I can't work with that team. That coach is just insane. I can't work with that coach. Don't say that to me. We can't work together. I don't believe in that. It's my job as a solutions expert. I'm going to find a way to work with that guy. I'm going to find a way to work. In my resume, you will not find one lick of evidence of someone that I couldn't work with. I've had the privilege of working with some of the most difficult, stubborn minds in athletics. But I have a lot of pride, and I figured out ways to be effective with them. Effective is a key word. I'm going to hit on that again in just a little bit. But when you're effective, you're fulfilled. And when you're fulfilled, we can do this forever. Back to the networking piece, man, there's a bunch of random names down here, but the connectivity is weird. When I was making this slide and I looked at and I started thinking through the stories and I was like, holy crap, what a bolt of lightning that bounced all over the place. Luck. Man, you're lucky in a lot of ways. Coach McNutt was the softball coach that pulled me off the lawnmower and said, hey, I want you to come wash laundry. She'd be the one that introduced me to Charlie Dudley so I could get into strength and conditioning. She was also a Hall of Fame softball coach who was an All-American at Texas A&M. Big circle. I'm at Texas A&M. I walk through the door, first thing I'm at's a Hall of Fame ceremony for Coach McNutt. And I'm like, well, get out of here. I'm going to go visit. So I walk over, talk to him, talk to her and all the people around there. Immediately, she gives me notoriety. You guys have no idea what you've just acquired in Bo Sandoval. And they're all like, what? She's like, yeah, I mentored him as a 20-year-old idiot. Starts telling them stories about my growth and whatever. She gave me notoriety, more notoriety in 10 minutes than would have taken me the next 2 years to earn as I'm working through my role at Texas A&M. Brian Neal was the gentleman that introduced me to Patrick Borkowski and the staff at USOC, just because I helped him move into his apartment when he was coming to USM for his graduate studies. Later on, I'm building one of the PIs in Vegas for the UFC, and Dustin, man, thank you, brother. Dustin Riddle has helped me with some projects, and man, when you get into those kind of high-stakes projects, things go awry, and you just want them to go right. Bunch of stuff showed up. There's pallets of crap. We got this grand opening coming up. All our executives want to be there. So I'm unloading pallets. I get a phone call. I was like, hey, man, I'm in Vegas. What are you doing? It's Brian Neal. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I can't hook up. I'm unloading pallets of crap. I got to get this organized. Give me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He shows up. This dude's working at Virginia Tech. He's not getting paid for this. He spends 3 hours with me unloading pallets, and we put all this stuff together. Like, weird. Melissa Moore, now last name's Seal, she got married. She's been the head strength coach for Olympic sports at LSU for close to 20 years now. She was Tommy Moffitt's right-hand man, introduced me to Tommy 15 years ago. Holy shit, Tommy's at Texas A&M. Really easy connection. Now we've got this very unified, very cohort approach to what we've got going on at Texas A&M. Oh yeah, she also made my wedding cakes. So, it's full circle. Your network is going to give you so much unless you just burn it all to the ground. So build more bridges than you burn. For the sake of time, I want to go through some of those. The other big one for me is, man, be legit. No gimmicks. Gimmick free. This was a spoof infomercial. So when we first opened up the PI, all our executives were up there in the offices, and they just knew we were doing some wizardry down there with fighters. Like, they got to be doing some crazy shit. Like, you know those memes where like, this is what you think I do, this is what I actually do. That's basically what we created for him. So Julian Marquez was a good sport. We wrapped a bunch of shit around his neck and forced to stand in front of him, hitting him with a pool noodle and just doing stupid stuff. But it was a fun joke. But in reality, man, be legit. No gimmicks. I have so much respect for this industry and so much respect for the idea of preparation and strategy into preparation that I'm not going to dilute it with a gimmick or a one-off or something that looks fancy or something entertaining. Training can be entertaining. You know what else is entertaining? Fucking winning. Winning is entertaining. So, always execution over arbitrary completion. Our industry is littered with this. Hey man, complete 25. Hey, just do it in under 10 minutes and you're good. Sports isn't completion. Sports is execution. Even if I'm running a marathon, executing a race is very different than running a recreational marathon. Everything we do is boiled around execution. So this idea of arbitrary completion just eats me alive. Be careful with absolutes. I live that every day. Very rarely will you hear me say, I'll never use a barbell to do this. Or we never do that type of agility drill. You never know when that thing might be useful. You might be eating your words 5 years from now. I really try to avoid that. Go to the source. When I want information, I'm going to try to find the best source of the information, not the most convenient source. Risk versus reward. I don't know if you guys know, but athletics is risky, all of it. There's nothing safe about any sport. They all have risk. Our job is to mitigate risk, but I'm not going to hide behind that so much that we're not going to gamble. We're going to work. We're going to push envelopes. How do you feel good about that? Well, you got to be calculated. So the more competency, the more calculated you are, taking risks isn't that big of a deal. In fact, they become very calculated risks to go and fetch reward. So while I respect this statement, risk versus reward, I hear it all the time, My competency is going to let me know just how close I can dance to that line. I'm not going to hide behind other skill sets just because I'm scared of the risk. I'm going to educate myself on the risk so we can go and execute. Get experienced eyes on it. Ask for outside perspective. I think I'm good at this. Hey, man, you think I'm good at this? No, dude, you suck at it. Okay, good. That's real perspective. Now I can go and address that thing. If I just keep being my own critic, I'm going to be terrific. I need the other critics. Get other people's eyes on it. Be willing, but be critical. Fame is a vapor, popularity an accident, and riches take wings. There's only one thing that endures, and that is character. This reminds me of another quote about integrity. The thing about integrity is if you have it, nothing else matters. If you don't have it, nothing else matters. So when I think of gimmicks and bullshit and things like that, that's exactly what I revert to in terms of what I want to be known for. Seek peripheral projects. Look, if you just want to be a strength coach and you just want to do X's and O's of strength and conditioning, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have adventurous thoughts of ambition and growing in your career, you need to dabble into peripheral projects, all kinds of things, community service, building projects, education, mentorship. All those types of things are going to equip you to be a better practitioner, leader, all those different roles. Me, I have this affinity when it comes to building things. At Belhaven College, I built my own office. I had a donor donate flooring because our flooring was molding, and I felt terrible. In his three-piece suit, he helped me rip the old flooring out over a weekend and put in new flooring. At the University of Michigan, we had some just really generous donors. We built, I don't know, something stupid, $160 million South Athletic Campus. Being a part of those projects and understanding, we're not just designing to be pretty, we're designing to be effective. We're designing nowadays trying to provide logistical ease to athletes, building integrated buildings, integrated systems where an athlete doesn't have to go to 17 different appointments to get to something. Everything is logistically, oh yeah, by the way, if we forgot, they gotta go to class. They gotta go meet with an advisor. They gotta go get a part-time job, whatever the other thing is. So building things that are going to provide efficiency, not to mention a wow experience in terms of training. At the UFC, we built 4 of them. I was blessed that we built all 4 of them with Sornex. These guys just make life way easier. And then we look really fucking cool. Career transitions. Control the controllable, use experience to steer direction. People always ask, I get this question, man, I want to work with professional fighters. How do I do that? There's not a roadmap for that. The only thing I can tell you is you need to start engineering your skill set so that one day you can be marketable if you want to work with a professional fighter. So if you don't know anything about combat sports or conditioning or the multitudes of agile conditioning, energy systems, if you don't understand metabolism and those types of things, weight cutting, anybody ever seen a weight cut live? It's brutal. It's the worst thing. I have never seen anything like what Ollie has seen in real life. But watching a weight cut is you're watching someone die. They're killing themselves. And then they revive, and then they turn around and knock someone out. It's amazing. It's like the most entertaining thing in the world. But in these career transitions, it's not that you're trying to pick the right spot. Where's the right spot? It's are you trying to acquire the right skills? You got to look at at least I look at every transition. Am I acquiring the skills that I want? Or am I transitioning into something that it's going to pay my bills, but it's not going to give me anything? If it doesn't, then that's the bad move. That's the bad move. That's where convenience. And look, I understand necessity. But if you're prepared, if you're equipped, if you're skilled, if you have tangible things, you will be marketable. Someone's going to find you and someone's going to hire you. But you have to be selective, to be intentional and own your path, to be able to guide it the way that you want to. You've got to be intentional. You can't build a reputation on what you're going to do, but what you've done. So you got to be selective on what those things are that you're going to do. Some things I try to avoid. I'll get through this quick. I know I'm out of time. I love this quote. My dad used to tell me this all the time. Son, there's expensive knowledge and there's cheap knowledge. Cheap knowledge is when I can learn from my buddy's mistake. He made a mistake. I watched him. Hey, we worked. Great. I can learn from him. Expensive knowledge is when I have to learn from my own mistakes. And then I make it again. I gotta learn from it. That gets expensive. There's a cost associated with that. So look around, have your white belt mentality on, and learn from those that have come before us. There's almost nothing original in S&C anymore. They're all adopted skills that we manipulate and move around. if you've got your eyeballs open and your ears open. Possessiveness, I try to avoid. My athletes, my time, my weight room. I don't speak like that. One, it starts to build barriers. It starts to build a hierarchy that doesn't need to exist. I'm an instructor. I'm an educator. I'm an influencer. I can't do that with a bunch of walls and barriers because I own this and he's my athlete and that's my coach and that's my weight room. People say it loosely all the time, but there are people listening. Your language is important. I can't work with that person, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe in that. I think that's a weakness. If you have that, this industry is hard for you. Saying the word no. I try to use things like, let's figure it out. Let's dive into it. Let's experiment. Let's call an expert on that. But what I try to avoid is no. Celebrating a lack of composure. Oh my gosh, I hate this. We got to a point where kid gets done with something hard, they throw up. Good job, man. I'll get the trash can for you. Good job. Well, he's laying on the ground. He's throwing up. That's not composure. That's defeat. If you're in a fight, you're getting your ass kicked right now. I'm going to continue stomping you. Or we celebrate, a kid gets done with a hard workout and they lay on their back and they leave a sweat angel on the ground. We're like, good job, man. You did it. When you're ready, you just get up and come on over. We'll rehydrate. That's a lack of composure. You're actually teaching them to do that. They'll do that on the field of play. They'll do it on the court. They'll do it on the wrestling mat. They'll look for opportunities to recover like that if you teach them like that, versus teaching them how to control their breathing, open their eyeballs, look around, and anticipate what the next action as you're recovering. Composure, that we can coach composure in training, but we've been celebrating this idea of like, make them puke, it's a good workout. Make them lay down in their exhaustion. It's a good work. Coach, I had to go take a nap when I got done. Well, fuck, we're either underfueled or I did something wrong. But composure can be instructed. It can be taught. Sorry for that soapbox. Wait a minute. That slide didn't work correctly. So I grew up around fables. I heard a lot of fables. My parents used to tell them to me all the time. I figured I'd wrap up this with a fable. Because a career path, people will try to say like, oh, you did this right, you did this wrong, or I don't know what I did right or what I did wrong. I just know that there's a drive that led me down some pathways that opened up opportunities. And if you're like, hey, what are you good at? I'm good at capitalizing on opportunities. But that's what I got good at. So I'll leave you with this story. There's a bird flying around. You guys probably heard this. I heard this when I was a kid, and it just stuck with me. But there's a bird flying around. In the wintertime, he's way up there, and his wings start to freeze. And he starts to have an oh shit moment, and he's like, I can't move. And sure enough, he locks up, and he comes crashing down to the ground into a pile of snow. And as he's laying there, freezing to death, I'm going to die. About that time, a cow backs up and takes a shit right on top of him. And as he's laying there, freezing to death in a pile of shit, he's thinking, like, what did I do to deserve this? Like, this is a brutal, like, what a worse way to go. And the shit starts to warm him up, and he starts to thaw out. And the next thing you know, he pops out onto his feet, and he shakes his wings, and he's exhilarated. And he's like, I can't believe, like, I'm alive. In fact, he's so excited, he starts to sing. And he sings so loudly that he gets the attention of a cat. And the cat walks over and swallows him whole. And then he's done. And the moral of the story is, not everyone that shits on you is your enemy. Not everyone that gets you out of shit is your friend. And when you're in deep shit, just keep your mouth shut. Thank you guys for your attention. Thanks for coming at 8 in the morning. Enjoy.